Hello everyone, welcome to Sermon Prep. This Sunday we will celebrate the Feast of All Saints. Of course, it's usually celebrated on the 1st of November. Well, it is in some places around the Catholic world, but here in Southern Africa it's moved to the Sunday that follows that. So it's this Sunday. It's a wonderful feast because in a real way it reminds us that we are a community, of men and women. Maybe we have died, maybe we're still alive, but we're all gathered around the Lord. And so the vastness of the community that love and know Jesus Christ is expressed. It comes through clearly in this feast. And that's good for us to remember at this time as we make our way through these weeks of prayer in preparation for our synod consultation. This coming week, our theme for prayer is communion, that we are linked to one another. And that link is achieved because we are all children of God. And that will come out clearly too in our second reading. We'll have a look at that just now. But I hope that as we prepare for this Sunday, we have that in the back of our mind. The community, the beauty of the community, the challenge of being in communion with one another, and the challenge that comes to us from being in communion with the Lord, being His sons and daughters. It is a challenge sometimes, not always easy. So that's what we're looking at this week. That's what we're celebrating this week. Let's have a look at the readings the church gives us for this wonderful celebration of All Saints. So the first reading comes from the book of Revelation. I hope you noticed I said Revelation, not Revelations. That's a common mistake that so many people make. Revelations, plural, S at the end. That's not what it is. It's the book of Revelation, no S on the end. So just a little bit of silly information, I suppose, but something we can try to remember. Okay, and so we're reading from the 7th chapter of that book, the final book in the Bible, verses 2 to 4 and then 9 to 14. The psalm is Psalm 24. And the little verse that we will repeat is, "These are the people who seek your face, O Lord." And is that not what the community, the church, does? It seeks the Lord's face. We want to look upon the Lord because it is the Lord who is our focus. And the more focused we are on Him, the more we will live as His children, the more effective our communion will be. So that's the psalm. The second reading comes from the first letter of St. John, chapter 3, verses 1 to 3. Our gospel is taken from the famous Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospel. Chapter 5, verses 1 to 12. We are familiar, we're so familiar with the Sermon on the Mount, and we're so familiar with this gospel, commonly called the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes give us, if you like, a recipe for discipleship. And it is a recipe that would have been in the time of Jesus, in both the Greek world and the Jewish world, a recipe that was in stark contrast to the ways of the Greeks, of the Jews. Nothing much has changed, has it? It's in stark contrast to our world, the values and the ideals of our modern world. Blessed are the peacemakers. We're all for war and beating each other up and arguing and being in disagreement. Blessed are the meek? No, that's not what we're about. And so as we make our way through these Beatitudes, the recipe for Christian discipleship, we are immediately struck by the challenge of Jesus' sermon. It would have been uncomfortable for his listeners just as much as it's uncomfortable for us. Jesus gives the Beatitudes as a real challenge. He's calling his disciples, those who heard him as they sat on the Mount of Beatitudes all those many, many years ago. He was giving them a challenge. If you want to follow me, it's going to be difficult. You're going to stand in contrast to the world. But if we can do this, we can become a community that is really focused on one another, focused on God. And so that challenge comes to us this Sunday too. If we can really work at this, we can become a real community of God. Of course, St. Matthew is, if we remember correctly, St. Matthew is writing to his church, of course, made up of mainly Jewish converts. And so, as we know throughout Matthew's Gospel, there are many references to the Old Testament. The New Testament, Jesus is seen as a fulfillment of the Old. And so, the image of Jesus going up the mountain, sitting down and teaching, recalls Moses. Moses went up Mount Sinai to get the law, the covenant, and he brought those down and shared it with the people. Well, here Jesus is sharing a new law, a new way of being community. The commandments, the 10 commandments, were specifically to unite God's people together and with God. Now the Beatitudes are doing the same thing. And so for those who were listening to Matthew, there would have been a really powerful reminder of Moses. And so the link to Moses, Jesus as the new Moses, these Beatitudes as a new way of being community. We too are called to take seriously the 10 commandments, the commandments of God. They haven't been thrown out the window. Jesus didn't come to abolish the law. Remember, we read that in Matthew's Gospel too, but to fulfill it. And so the 10 commandments are important for us. And so now too are the Beatitudes. How do we, as the Christian community in 2021, nearly 2022, live our communion with God and our communion with one another, bearing in mind that we have the commandments, the law. We also have the new law, the new ways of God that are founded on love. So that's what we find in Matthew's Gospel for this Sunday. The first reading from the book of Revelation is divided really into two parts. And the first part is sort of verses 1 to 8. We don't read all those, we read 4 to 9. But anyway, if you go to that, you'll see. And then 9 to 14. Traditionally, the book of Revelation, the author is believed to be John, who had been exiled, if you like, banished to the island of Patmos. And John has a real sense of the persecuted Christian. And so that comes out in this reading, doesn't it? The first part, verses 1 to 8, we get a real sense of the persecuted church and those that are suffering. But But we realize that in the second part, that those persecuted Christians, if they remain faithful, will be victorious. The waving of the palm branches is a symbol of that. Of course, we know that throughout the book of Revelation, we have symbolism, we have numbers that speak to certain things. So, John is writing to the 7 churches of Asia. What do we know about the number 7? It's perfect. It's whole. So, in other words, John is writing to all the churches. So we have a sense of that. The idea of being sealed, doesn't that remind you of the prophet Ezekiel? He speaks of being sealed, and those that are sealed bear the mark of the Lord. And so they are special. Even though they suffer persecutions, God recognizes on the seal their commitment to Him. Of course, this vast number of people, these figures that John gives here. Is it only that number? No, but I think it's really indicating wholeness, completeness, vastness, and also that the number of those who are victorious will be known only to God. We don't need to know those numbers. So, the book of Revelation. Then John's first letter. Do you know throughout the scriptures, but also in the church, we have this challenge, this tension between we are and we will be. So we are saved by the death and resurrection of Jesus. That was an event in history. But we are also in the process of being saved through our acceptance, our living that moment. So we are saved, we are being saved. And that similar sort of tension comes up in this second reading. We are children of God, we are going to become children of God. It's a both and. Yes, we are children of God. We are made in the image and likeness of God. We are created by Him. We are known by Him. He knit us together in our mother's womb. Doesn't the psalmist say that? And so, right from the very, very first moment, even before we were created, God knew us and He loved us. We were His. But through our living our faith, by living the commandments, by living the Beatitudes, by being a community, we become more and more children of God. We become more and more His beloved children, close to Him. And in fact, the fullness of what that means will only be revealed in the future, when we're able to recognize Him face to face. So we are beloved children, we've been created as His beloved children, but we are also becoming His beloved children. That tension we see in various things in the scriptures and in our faith life. Okay, so there's some thoughts for this wonderful feast of All Saints. I hope you will join us, whether you're online or whether you're in person. I hope you will join us. It's a special feast, it's an important feast, and it's a feast that we should all celebrate with great joy, because it reminds us that we are all united. Whatever that number is, we are all united as God's beloved children. I look forward to seeing you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.